Hallelujah. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his apostles, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace upon the earth. I've come to bring peace, not peace, but the sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's enemies will be those of his household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. Whoever receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever receives a righteous man because he is righteous will receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives only a cup of cold water to one of these little ones to drink because he is a disciple, amen, I say to you, he will surely not lose his reward." When Jesus finished giving these commands to his 12 disciples, he went away from that place to teach and to preach in their towns. The Gospel of the Lord. Today is the feast day of Saint Benedict. Saint Benedict is very well known in our church. Saint Benedict, many people think that Pope Benedict took his name because he wanted to kind of emulate Saint Benedict, even though Pope Benedict actually claimed that it was because of Pope Benedict XV. He was inspired by that papacy, but many people still equate it with Saint Benedict, and even Pope Benedict saw Saint Benedict as a very needed patron for our church today. The story of St. Benedict, basically, as a young man, he studied in Rome, and he was living in Rome kind of during the downfall of the Roman Empire, right? In the early 400s, Rome vastly lost a lot of its power, and this is the beginning of what many people call the Dark Ages, right? Now, those ages were dark in a certain sense because the Roman Empire had been kind of a shining light in the world for many centuries. And beginning in the 300s and 400s, right, Rome was losing its power, and there began to be many barbarian invasions that took over. But one of the other things that happened in the Roman Empire, seemingly, was that it was seeming to lose its soul, right? That is the beginning of the downfall of all great civilizations. It begins to lose its soul and its identity. And St. Benedict, famously, he was studying in Rome, and he was scandalized at the corruption and the lack of virtue in the very capital of the Roman Empire. And so he decided, after finishing his studies, that he was going to leave Rome, and instead of trying to contribute to that area, he decided to leave and basically go live a life of prayer and study and work. Soon he began to collect many followers, and he actually ended up writing a rule, which is called the Rule of St. Benedict, what all Benedictine monasteries still use as their basic rule of life today. Now, St. Benedict was not the first person to write a rule. There were many different abbots and monasteries and rules of life that have been written. The reason why his has been so long-lasting, many people think, is because his rule was kind of the most realistic, right? There are many different monasteries and rules that were much more rigorous than the rule of St. Benedict, right? And that's why he's kind of a lasting influence. Part of the reason why many people refer to St. Benedict today is because many people think that in our civilization, we are kind of in the need of a similar strategy. This has been called the Benedict option in the church. How do we win back the culture? The Benedict option doesn't really mean that you flee from civilization, but rather it means you kind of have to step away and you have to regather the troops so that you can go back out and evangelize the world again. And examples of this, we're seeing a great increase, for example, in our culture today, of the use of private schools and even homeschooling. Right? Because many people think that the public education system is becoming so depraved, right, that they need to take their education into their own hands. That would be an example of the Benedict option. Now, one of the reasons why I think St. Benedict is so important, and what I think is one of the lasting legacies that he gave to the world, is those who followed after him. What many people don't realize is that many things that we take for granted in our modern civilization, right, we can thank St. Benedict and the monks of Europe for giving them to us. Again, many people think of the Dark Ages as the ages were dark because of the church. Actually, it was kind of like the church was the one shining light in the midst of those dark ages. There was not a coherent empire, and so oftentimes barbarians would come in, and not only would they terrorize people, but also they would terrorize buildings, right? And it was very hard to preserve education and knowledge in the midst of those dark ages. Thankfully, monasteries became kind of hubs of education. Monks made a great habit of establishing schools. Another thing that the monks would do, this is where we get the idea of hospitals, right? Hospitals came from monasteries, these communities of men who established great medical practices, right? And so they became the hospitals all throughout Europe. The monks can be thanked for many different advances in agriculture. One of the things that people would do to the monks is they would basically donate land to them so they could establish monasteries, but oftentimes the land that the monks received, right, people didn't want to give the best of land, so like they would give them swamps and things like that. And the monks learned how to drain and irrigate those areas and turn them into producing good agricultural land, right? The monks are to thank for so many of these great things in civilization. Now, just one last point about this. I think inspired by the monks, right, in our culture, there's a great divide between what we might call progressives and conservatives. Right? I'm not talking about Republicans and Democrats. I'm talking about progressives and conservatives. Progressives always wanting to advance and somewhat ignore the past, whereas conservatives, right, we always want to conserve the past and the greatness of the past. I think that all Catholics, in a certain sense, should be conservatives. That's what the monks were. Right? It didn't matter if it was Plato or Aristotle or some other philosophical thinker. The monks thought it was good to preserve those writings, and so they dedicated much time to copying those manuscripts. Whether or not the monks thought that different aspects of knowledge or music or art were good, right, they still sought to preserve them because they saw the value in them. I think that in our modern age, in which we are starting to have such a lack of respect for the past, every Catholic and every Catholic church should be like a mini monastery, seeking to preserve all that is good and true and beautiful in the knowledge and traditions of the past. If we don't preserve those traditions, right, they could be lost forever. Many of those great works from ancient civilization, like I said, from Plato and Aristotle and the like, we wouldn't have those today if the monks hadn't spent all that time preserving that knowledge and preserving those writings. I think it should be an inspiration for us today.